Welcome to another edition of the Keep Africa Trading Podcast coming from TradeMark Africa. My name is Moses Kamibaro and I'm your host today. More importantly, we're going to have a conversation with our guest, who's one of the board members of TradeMark Africa. And more importantly, we're here in Kigali, Rwanda on the 2nd and 3rd December, attending the Africa Trade Development Forum, where a vast range of conversations are happening across multi-stakeholders around everything specific to digital trade within the context of the African continent. So my guest's name is Celestine, and she'll introduce herself shortly.
Thank you. My name is Celestine Munda. I am a board member of TradeMark Africa. I've been on the board since 2022. And we've joined at an exciting time, when there's a lot of focus on opening up the African market for trade. In terms of background, I'm a consultant and an accountant, having retired recently.
Okay.
In 2022, and one of the things I was keen on was joining a board that has impact. And for me, this has actually ticked that box that I was looking for.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And given the stories I've heard on this podcast this last couple of days, there's a lot TradeMark is doing on the ground.
Yes, absolutely. There's a lot which actually is not known outside. Before I joined the board, I'd heard of TradeMark. I knew it was an aid for trade organization, but just the breadth and just the depth of its impact is not known outside. The impact it's having in terms of making trade easier across borders, making it easier for SMEs also to move around. Just helping government organizations enhance on trade policy. All this is not known to the average person. I think it's just probably limited to the trade world. I think, just the import of what it's doing, the scale of what it's doing ought to be known even more widely.
Great.
Yeah.
So the theme of the conference is digital trade. And I'm wondering if maybe you have some perspectives or reflections given the various panels and conversations that have been going over the last 2 days.
Yeah, so it's been interesting. I think yesterday in particular, the opening session, the acknowledgement by, the various leaders on the continent from both the private and public sector on the challenges we have in Africa in trade and the need to actually invest in opening up. I think it was very clear that we are trading more with the outside world, but trading less with ourselves. And therefore, if I look at what we discussed yesterday, the fact that we had our leaders being the ones who are actually sending that message out, for me, was really critical, because then it means we have our leaders actually putting their money where their mouth is. They are invested in making this work. They're investing in finding the right partners to actually get us moving. And they're actually investing to working with governments to see how we can come up with the right policies to enable this.
So speaking about governments, regulation, policies and the likes, how do you see the private sector in the context of trade working closely with government? And I know that TradeMark has served a very important role, for its entire existence, making that bridge happen.
So I think private sector has a lot to benefit. To be honest, if you look at the role of government, principally, it's actually to come up with an enabling environment for trade through policy. The traders are the private sector.
Correct.
So it is in the interest of the private sector to know what TradeMark is doing. It is important for the private sector to also proactively engage with the government to see what is it that can be done to unlock trade. So in the regulatory space, one of the things that stood out for me yesterday that was raised by His Excellency Haile Mariam was, we have policy, yes, because I think the whole idea, but we have policy, our issue is implementation. But I think the challenge was they are fragmented. We have 54, plus countries in Africa with different policies. Yes, we have the policies, but if you're going to trade across Africa uniformly, effectively, and efficiently, then there's need to harmonize those policies as far as possible. So I think that stood out for me. The second thing that stood out for me was the fact that this being a digital trade conference, was the fact that the internet penetration is low in Africa compared to the rest of the world. And that hampers this vision of digital trade, because digital trade depends on the extent of internet penetration. it depends on the extent of mobile penetration to make it work. So it is a great opportunity and a challenge as well. So when we think of what role private sector can play is listening into those ideas. So for example, if we have low internet penetration, we have low mobile penetration, what can the private sector players in that area do to help bridge that gap? So I think there are lots of opportunities for private sectors players to listen into those challenges and contribute by way of investment in helping governments open the market.
How do you see trademark specifically looking into the issue of what I'd like to call the digital divide? I think you already alluded to that to some extent, because as much as we're talking about digital trading, we've talked about internet penetration being somewhat limited. I think there's also a question of access, meaning
Yeah.
do you have the right device? Does it get online? Do you have coverage in those areas? And I think I would not expect trademark to get to that tactical level, but do you see any interventions that are helping alleviate that so that we don't leave anyone behind
Yeah.
as digital trade becomes the currency of how trade is done in the future?
Yeah. So one of the things that and as I was coming here, I was thinking, one of for me, the pillars of digital trade is data, because I think there is need for an appreciation that for digital to happen, you must have the data to make it happen, because data will help you, make informed decisions. So across Africa today, we have different policies guiding data. And the reason why I say that is even with the current internet penetration levels we have, which are low, admittedly, mobile penetration, there's an opportunity to look at how we can collaborate with the private sector player to have access to that data, albeit in a controlled environment, albeit within the ambits of the law. But therein lies the challenge, because all the 54 countries perhaps have various levels of data protection laws, some which have been enacted, some which have not, and even the ones which have been enacted are different. So if we are going to include everybody, there is need to find out what elements of the data can be shared, what elements of the law can we harmonize. And the example that was given at the opening session yesterday was, the obvious things are, obviously we can't share security data, but the other data we have, like if you take me, for example, maybe through my phone, you'll know where I'm going, you'll know what I'm buying, you'll know how frequently I'm buying it and from whom I'm buying it. What if there is a process of anonymizing that data and allowing us all to use it within the right regulatory, boundaries? So I think if we harmonize that, that allows us then to use the data and allows us to include more people that are currently not included. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
So future casting, I was thinking, probably 5-10 years from now, given your role and what you do at Trademark, where do you see this going? I think, of course, we know that Trademark until recently was more focused on the East African region. You now have a Pan-African mandate, so a lot more to do there. But how do you see this all evolving going forward again, both within the digital trade context, but broadly speaking, Trademark Africa as an organization?
So you're right. The footprint is growing, and it is growing with the recognition that trade is still hampered. Yes, we started in East Africa, going to Southern Africa, Horn of Africa, and now West Africa. So for me, if someone was to ask me to project, I'm looking at 5, 10 years from now, given the speed of technology and how things are going, the number one impact, before I look at the consequence, will be obviously increased digital, mobile and increased internet penetration. Number 2 is urbanization, where we're having more people coming to the urban areas and therefore more aware of the opportunities. And then the third thing is our population profile. We're having more younger traders coming into the market who are more digitally savvy. Their buying patterns are different. What they buy is different. How they buy is different. And probably when I then cast my mind into what's the future likely to look like, is to recognize that the trader of the future and how they trade will be so different from today. So we perhaps need to challenge ourselves that the manner in which we are implementing projects today, should it not maybe start changing, thinking of that trader of the future? The institutions we are dealing with today are designed for today and perhaps the past. Is there a need to change it to look at the future? In fact, one of the tracks I attended earlier, they even said even the skills within TradeMark that are designing those concepts for government, that are collaborating with government around policy creation, our policies today are not relevant for that policy of the future. So I think we will have more, because of digital, the market will be wider. The walls or boundaries will be porous because, with digital, the walls are really porous or the boundaries are porous. So it's coming up with concepts which recognize that we have more, more fluid and more porous world. We have a younger generation that is moving easily, and therefore our concepts need to reflect that.
There's something very interesting you just mentioned. You talked a little bit about the youth, this younger digital-first audience across the continent. And of course, this underpins, we think, the future of Africa, because we are already, I think, the youngest continent globally. But what is TradeMark's point of view around the convergence of youth, this digital trade moment? Also, given the fact that there's this expectation that governments are required to give jobs, but the reality of the ground is that people now have to create their own jobs. We see the youth are freelancing, they're creating their own little startups, trading. I know quite a few who do things on Instagram and WhatsApp and M-Pesa.
Yeah.
What's TradeMark's perspective around that? I'd be very curious to hear.
Yeah. I think it's worth borrowing on one of our success stories, which is the eSoko platform, which is the platform that has been designed to help women traders meet each other on an e-commerce platform, to know what products are being sold, where, what are the prices. By extension, that opportunity starts talking to the youth way of behavior. And one of the things TradeMark in its approach to being inclusive is also thinking of that population. So that population that prefers to trade digitally, it's about actually now extending, we have the opportunity to think of how do we replicate it, or do we leverage off its successes and actually come up with a platform that enables them. You've talked about, because a lot of the youth now will trade at home, or they'll work at home. So what is the platform, that's suitable for them? So I think there's scope in actually using that, for our success. I think the other thing about the youth, and it's something we also need to consider, and I reflect on the other organization that I sit on that has also realized this bulging youth market, is part of our concept creation, prototyping. We should actually have a youth on our team.
Absolutely.
So it's something we have, so a number of organizations now have, in addition to their normal board, they'll have the youth board. And the purpose of this is to challenge the traditional way of thinking. They know what they want, they know how they want it, so including them in the creation of these concepts. Just like the iSoko was not created in isolation, it's actually sitting with the women and understanding how they trade, what they need, what some of their challenges are.
Yeah.
So equally, I think in coming up with then the ideas, it's getting the youth to contribute to the creation of those concepts going forward.
So I'd like to come back and zoom in on you, more specifically understanding what your passions are or drivers are behind your time as a director at TradeMark, and just to understand what is it that motivates you, or what is it that you've seen and sort of found to be, I suppose, meaningful in terms of the accomplishments that TradeMark is bringing to the marketplace. And maybe just share with us some of your thoughts around that perspective.
So it's interesting. It goes back to why I joined the board in the first place. Because I was, when I retired, I was clear in my mind that I want to still play in the governance space. I want to use my experience to contribute to organizations to improve it. And I was clear that one of those organizations has to be an impact organization, and TradeMark is that. And that's how I joined it. And the trigger to that goes to my background. When I look at, the rural area where I'm married, I see a lot of women trade. They'll trade in tomatoes, they'll trade in onions, and they have a way of saving. They have, in fact, this particular group, they have little books, that they keep, and they trade. And every Tuesday, they meet, to take a little bit of money and save. But they're just these women. They have no big structure to support them. They don't have access to funding. And what I noticed, having interacted with them after some years, is the scale of their trading is limited. Just number one, by that little market that they are in. So they produce their potatoes around the lake there, or the onions, and they take it to the market. And the extent of trade is just amongst them. So they are limited, which means whatever they can generate to support them and support their families is limited. Secondly, because of the struggles they go through, a lot of the money that is generated ends up being consumed. Very little is put aside to then invest in the next one. And the fundamental reason is lack of investment. It's actually hand to mouth. And therefore, the idea that there was this organization, TradeMark, that helps trade was quite intriguing for me and interesting for me, because you can see the impact it's having on women traders, giving them the confidence to trade with each other, opening markets that initially they had not thought possible. Now they're trading more.
Yeah.
Whereas if you look at the women I'm referring to, their trade is just limited to that little market on the road. What if they could see what's happening across in Uganda and go to Uganda, trade more, which means now they have access to more resources, have access to more funding. So for me, that was really an interesting aspect for me about TradeMark. And it drives me actually to continue contributing to the organization.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So maybe as we come to probably our last question, I'd want to ask you if you can share any last insights, thoughts, reflections, anything that you think would be relevant to our audience to maybe get a bit more flavor in terms of things that possibly are important from a TradeMark perspective, but also whether it's your own personal views and even, looking at digital trade.
Yeah. So I just want to go back to, when I started and say, you don't know about TradeMark until you engage with TradeMark. You don't know about it until you go into it or deal or talk to the people that's been impacted. And I think I want to illustrate this with an example of my experience when we had a board meeting in Dar es Salaam, and we had the opportunity to go to the offices of Tanzania Revenue Authorities. And just to talk to them, we met the commissioner, and just the appreciation of what was being done. We went to the control room. We were able to see how they're tracking trucks, that come in through the port of Dar es Salaam, that are coming inland. So you're able to digitally track these lorries. And then, of course, when they go back, that is data that was not visible before. Just seeing them moving and first of all with goods, and unfortunately moving with less goods out. So already telling you the extent of deficit of outward trade just from a picture. And the speed with which they're able to do it. We're able to also see the control room where they're controlling trucks coming in and the speed with which they are moving. So for me, what intrigued me was just how these people are saying our life is now easier, things are moving faster, we've got more trucks in. In fact, their problem is now we've got too many trucks. So the question is, do we expand the one-stop border? So it's, trade has actually increased. So when we had the opening session yesterday and they were saying we've now moved from many days to 4 hours, or the trucks have increased, it is real. And for me, what I would like to leave people with is given the impact this has had on opening up trade that wasn't happening before, the frequency with which we are trading with one another, and then how the ecosystems around these borders, how they've been built, because there's more trade, so there are more SMEs around it. It's just grown and grown and grown. It's actually a story that would compel, any government to say, why can't I put my money here? It's creating more money. It means there's more money in terms of revenue, taxes collected, economic prosperity is improved, and we're just opening the markets and therefore meeting one of our agenda of improving intra-African trade. I think that's fantastic.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I think that's really profound because clearly, you've had the benefit of seeing firsthand what TradeMark is achieving on the ground, as it were.
Yeah. I think the other one was, we went to the internal container depot in Nairobi. And as we all know, in a lot of African countries, you go here, you get a rubber stamp. You go here, you get another piece of paper. It takes so long, you lose the paper, the process takes so long. But through this process, it's one-stop shop. There's a one billing portal, and then in terms of how the revenue gets split, that's in the back. So as a transporter or a trader, you don't get involved with all of this. And it's just amazing to see that, and the appreciation from the other side of how their lives have improved because of that.
Fantastic.
For me, I'm proud to be associated with TradeMark. And I can't wait to be, part of the journey going forward, especially as we now embed digital trade as the way to actually catalyze and just expand trade with the rest of the continent.
Well, Celestine, thank you so much for sharing with us. I really feel like you've kind of unpacked some of the key things that TradeMark is accomplishing, but also why you are connected to them, why you're part of them. But more importantly, understanding the impact that is being realized on the ground, the opportunities ahead, and also the possibilities that are yet to be, realized. So thank you so much. We're really happy to have had you on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Great.
Thank you.
So there you have it. Celestine has given us wonderful insights coming from her perspective as a board director at TradeMark Africa. My name is Moses Kamibaro. I'm the host of today's edition of the Keep Africa Trading Podcast. And more importantly, we hope you'll join us for more conversations like this to really understand how TradeMark is participating and catalyzing opportunities for trade across the African continent. We hope to catch you in the next one. Thank you.